to the final Reeher Annual Giving Boot Camp session. Once again, this is Alyssa Roach, Event Coordinator at Reeher. In this session, we'll be sharing some exciting news about the Reeher platform. But before we get started, I'd like to go over a housekeeping note and introduce today's speaker. So due to the larger than usual attendee number, everyone in this webinar is on listen-only mode. We would like to encourage you to ask as many questions as you may have by using the chat or Q&A function in your WebEx console. And we will time at the end of the presentation for any questions. Introduce Sean O'Malley. Sean has been with Reeher for 7 years, and before joining Reeher, Sean served as an intelligence analyst for the U.S. Army. So Sean is a product manager here at Reeher, and he is on a team that is responsible for the product roadmap. And he is here today to talk to you about something new that we have been working on for annual giving professionals within the Reeher platform. That, Sean, take it away.
Thanks, Alyssa. And so I actually originally came to Reeher as an analyst, and so I used to prepare a lot of research for events like this. And one thing I like about our product development process here at Reeher is it really is research-driven. So we start with looking at the trends in the data, and we use that to inform our product strategy. And so one trend that we've been looking at a lot lately in annual giving is this shift that's been happening with main annual giving channels. And so the data is from a study that we did last year. 38 institutions were a part of this study. In order to be included here, the institutions needed to have really good tracking of their appeal types. So in each of the last 10 years, 90% of their gifts needed an appeal type associated with it. And that gave a really good look at what the trends in the channels have looked like for the last 10 years. One is, direct mail has shown some improvement, and web obviously is a growing channel. But one of the things really concerns us about this picture is that dramatic decline and steady decline in the phone channel. And so if we look out next 5 years, and if it's on for that trend to continue. And so over 10 years, it's actually declined by over 50%. Even with the improvements in direct mail and web, it's really enough to replace those donors that are being lost through phone. And if that looks like for the average customer, that decline in phone donors, it's 3,477 fewer donors in fiscal 2017 compared to 10 years ago from that channel. And, there are some new channels that have popped up over time periods, so crowdfunding being one, averaging 294 more donors from that channel. Events being another, as a funding channel, growing by 130 donors. Social media being another, but not really showing that big growth yet. And none of these channels have really been able to replace those donors being lost through the phone. So, we started to think, well, maybe it's not necessarily a new channel that we're looking for, but the answer for this problem is figuring out how to use the channels we already have together more effectively. And so we started to dig into some of the characteristics of that phone model today and started to think about what a new model might look like. Main characteristics of the traditional phone model is that it's this, kind of annual giving state of these siloed channels. And, the way that staff is organized around the different channels, the technology systems that we use are built around these different channels. And one of the consequences of this has been that, staff and technology that are organized around the channel, they tend to be really good at maximizing that channel. It's not always what's best at maximizing the audience overall. And since every channel does use its own technology, what that means is it's really challenging to coordinate efforts across those different channels. A lot of the fundraising infrastructure has been built on channels. One thing we can see from the data is that donors aren't necessarily loyal to a specific channel. So donors might prefer to give through phone, or some might prefer to give through direct mail or web. What we see from their behavior is that donors tend to give through a lot of different channels. So if we have 2-time donors, 3-time donors, 4-time donors, and 5-time donors, their chart, we can see each time they give, the number of donors who are choosing the same channel every time declines. And a lot of people are giving sometimes through 3 or 4 different channels. By the time somebody's given 5 times, over half of them, actually 58.8% of them, go through more than one different channel. And then the observation, and you would have seen this earlier in the week in another presentation, but multi-channel sequencing really does improve results. So study, we looked at 7 institutions in the Reeher community. Those institutions provided us with all their lists for emails, for mails, as well as when people were contacted by the phone program. So this gave us a really good picture of what that sequence of events looked like for each of the donors that was being reached out to. And things that we saw here is that the multi-channel sequences really tended to outperform those single-channel sequences. So if you look at mail, mail there on the list, phone, 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 email, 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 those not perform nearly as well as some of the multi-channel sequences. For example, mail, phone, and those few on the left. So a new way to think about phone, as opposed to the siloed channel model, is to think about it as one part of a multi-channel strategy. When we talk about multi-channel, what we mean is the timing and the sequence of the different channels is all coordinated. Those channels together to really create a cohesive message that will capture the donor's attention. So there's evidence to show that this type of coordinated multi-channel outreach really does drive results. It's challenging in today's world where so much of the fundraising technology is built around this model of siloed channels. And then one other challenges to being able to implement this type of model is the segment-driven prioritization used today in the traditional phone programs. Segments are a helpful way to plan and distribute outreach across the population. One, the challenges with it is that it is a really time-consuming manual effort to build and track those segments. What also happens is the segmentation ends up dictating when people get contacted. So when contacted in October, that's because that's when the econ grads from the 2000s segment was slotted to be contacted, and that might not necessarily be the time of year that I prefer to donate. Inevitably, when we create these segments, top prospects are going to slip through the cracks just based on how we've defined each of those segments. And so we tend to solicit donors year-round. One thing that is clear from data, the one you would have seen earlier in the week, that donors have a really high tendency to give around the same time they gave last year, around their donation anniversary. And so the chart here shows, so you see the 0 bottom there, that that indicates somebody gave the exact same month as they had a year prior. Plus 1 would mean they gave 1 month later. Minus 1 would mean that they gave 1 month later. There's that really high peak around 0, and in fact it's 65.9%, nearly 2/3 of constituents who live at the same time each year, within 2 months of that. And so falls of the segment-driven prioritization is that it make it difficult to be able to coordinate the outreach based on things like donation anniversary, because some timing is dependent on those segments. That we've seen is that PDI and PDI do a really good job of predicting the most likely donors. And this is another chart from earlier in the week. But what's being shown here is that green segment on the left. That's the segment that has the highest DVI and highest PDI constituents. The average participation rate in that segment is 35%. And compared, on the right to the orange segment, which has the lowest scored donors by EVI and PDI, the print rate there is 0.8%. And so that 5% participation rate in the green segment is actually 7 times what the overall rate is across the community. So there's a huge lift to reaching out to those people in the green segment. A new model for prioritizing prospects, we can actually look to what's happening in the business world on this. So you might be familiar with IBM's Watson, debuted on Jeopardy, but they're licensing that technology to other businesses so that they use options and recommendations to help make better decisions. And so this is one example of using algorithms. There are other really big companies like Amazon, Apple, Intel are investing a lot of money into this type of technology. One of the advantages of using algorithms is that things really easy to manage. They can handle day-to-day tasks, and so, for example, of prioritizing prospects, they're able to make decisions on who should we contact today, who are the best prospects. And because the technology is so scalable, it makes it possible to really personalize things like timing of outreach specific to the individual donor. And also able to take into account predictions, things like PDI and PDI, to help prioritize the most likely donors so they don't fall through the cracks. Some element of traditional phone programs is call center infrastructure that they've been built around. And so they involve lots of expensive hardware that's difficult to obtain, systems that are difficult to manage and keep the data up to date. Really involved lots of consultants or even outsourcing to be able to manage the systems. The systems are designed to really be able to do as much calling as possible. What we end up with is a situation where prospects are being called 15 or more times in a single campaign. And so that we can see from the data that there's this quickly diminishing return to more attempts calls. What this shows here, you see the number of attempts at the bottom. That blue line is showing the contact rate on each consecutive attempt, and the orange line is showing the pledge rate. So on the first attempt, you have a 0.5% chance, roughly, that somebody is going to answer the phone, and 1.5% chance that they will donate. And best chance of reaching somebody on that first attempt. By the time you come to them 2, 3, 4, or more times, your chances of them answering the phone and ultimately donating really decrease pretty rapidly with each consecutive attempt. Around the 8th attempt, it really bottoms out. So now we've got just a bit more than a 2% chance that they'll answer the phone, less than 0.5% chance that person will donate. So we can see that calling people 15 or more times isn't really the best strategy, but it's one of the levers that we have to pull in this traditional call center model. And so when we got a new model for that, it's something that we call person-to-person fundraising. What that means is that it takes what makes phone unique, and there is a unique element to phone. It's the one channel where you have one person, or it's the rate channel where you have one person reaching out to another person, asking them for money, and it gives donors a chance to interact directly with somebody who's going to be impacted by their support. But phone isn't the only way that we can get that message across anymore. So in a person fundraising model, the focus is all on building those one-on-one relationships, and we're able to leverage data to really build a personalized experience. And think about phone as a channel anymore, but as this person-to-person fundraising channel, as a person-to-person fundraising program, that really opens us up to lots of different ways to get in touch with people and get that message across. That we've been working on here at Reeher, and I'm very excited. Today I get to announce for the first time officially a new product that we call Appeal. So first, predictive multi-channel person-to-person fundraising platform. It's a tool, so it hooks in with the Reeher platform. It's able to plug into the data feed you've already set up. So it's per person, which means that it's really it puts student fundraiser at the center of all the activity, all the outreach with the constituent. They're in customized outreach plans, so they know exactly how to engage with donors. And a donor communicates with that same student throughout the process. Whether it's an email one day or a phone call the next day, it's that same student that the donor is communicating with. And a channel, so phone is certainly a part of that, but there's also ways to get in touch with people through email, through text message, through mail, through web. And it's so that means that it uses our scores to prioritize the best prospects for the day. Set things like donation anniversary so that it can really customize the timing of outreach for the specific person. With those the algorithm driving the prioritization, frees you up to be able to think more strategically about your program. A few different components to One Appeal. For the student fundraiser, what they have is they have a modern easy-to-use interface, and that's where they place all their calls. They do things like they can schedule callbacks, record donations. That's still their primary role, is to place the calls. Things like email will go out in an automated way based on how you've set them up. And then driven prioritization for them means that they're going to see more answered calls, and they're going to a lot more time talking with prospects because they get, the best contact on a given day, and they're going to be reaching out to people at that time of year when they like to donate. And since into the Reeher data feed as well, they're always going to be working with the latest information when talking to prospects. For the donor, this really gives them a completely personalized experience So you're able to customize that play flow for them. So, whether it starts with a phone call and then an email, and we follow up with a phone call, that's all something that you're able to customize. All the talking points, when students are talking to them, the email is all going to be personalized for the donor. And again, that one-on-one student-to-donor relationship, so whether they're receiving an email one day or a phone call next day, and they hear a voice, it's all coming from that same student to really help build that relationship. And they get these mobile-friendly payment pages. So whether it's sending emails out to them, they're able to easily, quickly enter those donations, whether that's on a mobile phone, on a tablet, or on a computer. So for the giving team, automations and predictions that algorithm-driven prioritization replaces the need for the complicated segmentation schemes. So you're able to focus on sharing the message, personalizing the donor experience, and the management tools you need to be able to monitor what's happening in your campaign, and that really enables you to go in and tweak and optimize that campaign. So, quick demonstration of how it works. I'm going to go through a scenario here. So we've got a few people to introduce. Chris is going to be our annual giving director at West University. We'll also talk about Karen. She's our donor. She's from the class of 1990, and she's a BS in biology. And then the situation is going to be our student caller. He's from the class of 2020 at Western University, and he is studying history. To start the campaign, first thing that Chris does is she goes into One Appeal, and she goes and sets the solicitable pool. What this does is she's going to say which constituents are eligible for those student fundraisers to reach out to. So she applies things like contact restrictions, and maybe if there's a certain segment of people they want to carve out specifically for a different purpose, we'll create that list, and then she can upload it, import it into here, and those people available to the students. The algorithm now is going to churn through that list and figure out who's the best person to call on a particular day, but she doesn't need to kind of schedule. Is that she designs the solicitation play. So, for example, they're going to control what that experience looks like for the donors. So in this example, we're going to start out with a phone call. So that's something that happens. Next, it's going to follow up with an email, and that will be 10 minutes later. 3 days later, if that person hasn't donated yet, it'll continue on to action 3. So get another follow-up phone call. If they still haven't been able to get a hold of the donor, then a second follow-up email will send out. And you can see in the second email on there, she's used a different email template than the first one. She's got follow-up email 1 in the first one, follow-up email 2 in the second one. She's really able to customize the message in each of those. One of the things she needs to do to get set up is to go in and create her emails, where she can add a lot of personalization. So things like the donor's name, obviously, she's able to put in the agent's name. So other data points from the donor's profile, so things like school of graduation. If you ask them out for each of your donors, that's something that you can insert in the emails as well. So once she's getting those, she needs to set up her talking points as well. So these are what the agents will have when they're on the phone with prospects. And she's set different criteria for each one. So for example, for the new STEM building, that might be a talking point that is of interest to people with science degrees. So she set that criteria. That's only going to show up for people with science degrees. And the tennis team talking point, maybe that only shows up for people who were on the tennis team when they were at Western University. This might be an example of one, be a good talking point for everybody. So you can have that one set to display for anybody. Now that she has everything set up, she's ready to start the campaign. Nathan, our student fundraiser, he's showing up for his first shift and ready to go now. So he goes ahead and gets started. So the first person that shows up on his list, and the algorithm now churns through to find out the best person is to call today. So it picks Karen, and it picks her because she last gave around 11 months ago, so her donation anniversary is coming up. She's also got a high PDI score, so that is also a good indicator for her. So now that Karen has come through in the queue, Nathan is going to place the call. So he's right through the interface here. In this case, Karen wasn't able to answer, so he does a voicemail, and she sees that voicemail later that day. Now what's going to happen after Nathan goes in and enters any notes, as a result of the call, the system is going to look back at that play that Chris set up and we'll move on to action number 2 now, since we weren't able to get a hold of Karen on the first attempt. Is to send an email 10 minutes after the call. Karen gets her personalized follow-up. Again, is coming from Nathan, who is the same person that had left her the voicemail. And so excited, she sees the email, she wants to donate, she intends to donate, but it kind of slips her mind, and she forgets about it. So, later, kind of looking back at the play flow that set up, and that happens is wait 3 days, and then if they still haven't donated, we're going to place a follow-up call. And so up for his shift again. It doesn't necessarily need to be exactly 3 days later. The system will wait a little bit longer for him to show up. But now again, he's getting started, and the first person that pops in on queue again is Karen. And this time, she comes to queue because she kind of entered that play flow, and it's time to place a follow-up call. So this time he does answer. And going through his talking points there in the middle, Nathan and Karen talk about the STEM building, and that she's really interested in, and she decides that she wants to renew her gift this year. So he begins entering the donation right in one, so he does that right there on the right side. So Karen will donate $50, indicate whether or not her company has a matching gift. He verifies her employer, all that. So he can enter her credit card through the system, but actually Karen prefers not to give her credit card over the phone. So when that he does have, he can enter it as a pledge in case it flows back to Chris and she's able to send out the pledge card to Karen. But Ethan offers to send her a link in an email, and so Karen decides to do that. Link, and when she clicks on it, a lot of the information is already pre-filled out for her because Nathan was able to capture things like her donation amount. He was able to verify her address while they were on the phone. So now she really quickly go through, enter her credit card information, and complete her donation. And so it flows back then to the dashboard in the Reeher platform, so it has full visibility to all the activity that's happening in her campaign. So that's a really quick scenario of how One Appeal works. We'll actually officially be launching this to the broader market closer to July, but we want to give you all a first look here at boot camp. So it's for campaigns beginning July 1. In fact, we have customers who are going to be using it over the next few months. If this is something you're interested in learning more about, you can email info@reeher.com or reach out to one of your CSMs, one of your CSRs, and they'll put you in touch with the right people. So let's open up to Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sean. We did have one question come in, and that was, does One Appeal work with a dialing system, or will students have to dial manually with a phone?
Question. So One Appeal does work with a dialing system, so it uses a cloud-based dialer to place the call. So it is click call. The student clicks the call button in the interface, and it facilitates that call. There's a couple different ways that can work, and that's something we can talk about on one. But yes, it is integrated into the tool.
Great, thank you. So another question is, what is the ideal number of student fundraisers? And maybe you could clarify what you mean by that, but perhaps while using this tool.
Yeah. So, and people have been looking at things like right sizing, and so it depends a lot on the institution in terms of what the ideal number of student fundraisers would be. But this can be your primary outreach plan, giving program. So this could be something that you use for reaching out to all of your alumni and parents, or be something that you out a specific segment and out to them in this way. So it could be something you use specifically for grads or parents or something like that.
Great, and she did clarify. She said to implement most effectively.
Yeah, and I think most effectively be that kind of the full pool of alumni and parents that you have available. And the reason for that is that the algorithm has, the better it can prioritize the best prospects for you. So with a very small pool of prospects, it only has, if it's 1,000 prospects, it can only prioritize the best prospects out of that pool of 1,000. But a pool of 50,000 prospects, you can look deeper to find prospects within that pool.
So another question that just came in is, how does it work to process credit cards with One Appeal?
Yeah, so we are going to be partnering with Stripe to be able to process credit cards in One Appeal. So that's an integration that we will provide. There's a few different ways they take payments. So one is when the agent's on the phone with somebody, they're able to enter the credit information in right through the tool. So you're also able to include links in all of the emails that are being sent out by the system. So when you're personalizing those emails, you can add to the donation form emails. And then kind of what we went through in the example here, when a student is on the phone with a prospect, they have that option to be able to send out a link to them that has a lot of the information already pre-filled, and they can do it either through email or through text message. They text out a link to the person.
Question came in, what type of equipment is needed for cloud-based dialing?
Yeah, so there's no equipment needed. One of the two options that you have, you just need kind of your computer and a web browser. So it all works that way. You can integrate with your existing phone, in which case we're going to call you first to start the billing process. So we'll call you first, get you connected, and then we'll start calling the constituents. So there's equipment needed for that option. But then you can also choose to place the calls directly through the browser as well, in which case you don't even need a separate phone, just your computer and a headset or even earbuds connected up to it.
Could they be used by volunteers?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it could be used by volunteers. We have our other product, Class Agent, that is really designed specifically for peer-to-peer fundraising, in the sense that you might have volunteers who are reaching out to non-peers, but maybe you have a few volunteers from the business school who will come for a few days and do some outreach. That's a really good situation where they can use this type of product, because the product will find the people for them who are best to contact, and it'll serve everything up for them. So a little bit different from the peer-to-peer world, where you want to let your volunteers choose who they're reaching out to.
Sure. Another question. You mentioned direct mail being part of this. How does that work?
Yeah. So kind of the first way that we're integrating direct mail in with this is we'll be able to go in on demand and list of people that are kind of ready for contact, will be contacted soon, or have already started that flow. So you can imagine once every couple of weeks pulling that list and sending it out to your direct mail provider.
Great. Can you have multiple campaigns going on at the same time?
So yes, you can have multiple campaigns going on at the same time. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, the best way to set it up would be to put the majority of your constituents in a single campaign, so that the algorithm has as many people to work with when it's looking for the best people to contact. Situations where it makes sense to carve out a specific group of people into a separate campaign. So those examples would be if you have specific students you want reaching out to recent grads, and maybe it's more of a check-in call, it's not as much of a fundraising call, you could do a separate campaign just for those recent grads and maybe just assign 2 or 3 of your student fundraisers to that campaign. That'd be a good example of where it makes sense to carve out a separate campaign for that.
So another question is, how does this fit in with Class Agent?
And so kind of related to the other question about it is a product that has some good uses for volunteers. We do see it as very related to Class Agent. Class Agent is really designed for and sized for peer-to-peer using. So when the volunteers have some close link to the people that they're reaching out to. So like things in Class Agent, they're able to pick the people they're reaching out to, and they can really customize their emails and everything like that. Here, they're both person-to-person fundraising, but this is really for that model where outreach don't already have a relationship with the people they're reaching out to. So, some of the benefits of using algorithm to assess people to contact and provide some of those tools in an automated fashion are really tailored for that type of person-to-person fundraising.
Great. And then, so you did talk about this, but I don't think you actually walked us through it. So caller says, I'll send you a link. Does the caller then have to build an email, or does one appeal do sort of a walkthrough to a scripted email?
So yeah, you as the use what that email looks like. So it will be a template. The caller does not create email. So they verify the person's email address, and then it's kind of a one-click to send out that email to the person.
Good. happens when students turn over? How does the system handle constituents that they're assigned to?
There's weight steps in there so that it can handle when someone turns over. So in our example here, if Nathan had started reaching out to Karen, but then he wasn't working anymore, the system would essentially assign her to the next available student who logged in and started working on that campaign. You'll see that, okay, we were supposed to contact Karen 3 later. Nathan's been inactivated, so we should assign her to somebody else, or maybe he just hasn't taken shifts in a while and it's been 2 weeks. So let's assign Karen to somebody else so that we can continue the outreach.
Great. And if I want certain students to contact specific constituents, for example, if we have some students specifically dedicated to reaching out to recent grads?
Yeah, and that's a good example of where you could use multiple campaigns to split that out. So recent grads, a good one. So you could split, especially if you've got some students dedicated to that type of outreach. There might be other situations where we've got a few students who are dedicated only to reaching out to graduates from the business school. So you could have a different campaign just for those graduates from the business school.
Good. A question that just came in, is this product intended to take the place of a call center or phone-a-thon software?
So definitely, it definitely can take the place of kind of a traditional call center or phone-a-thon software. So this is something you could look at as kind of replacing your existing phone program today. So you lose all those constituents available to be contacted through this program. So yeah, it could replace that.
Great. Do we have any other questions about this product? Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for sharing One Appeal with us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. It's been really great to share best practices, research, hear from our customers, just ways to really use the Reeher platform to accelerate your annual giving results. So if you have any questions about the content presented in this week's webinar series, please reach out to your CS team. We'll be sharing the slides and recordings of the webinars, so look out for that. I think it goes without saying we are thrilled to have shared One Appeal with you today and look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you as we continue to launch this project. So thank you all so much for joining us this week. Hope you have a good rest of your Thursday.